10 to 20 sets per week per muscle group. That's a statement that you hear thrown around by a lot of evidence-based people, by myself, by a lot of really good coaches out there. And I think there's a lot of confusion when it comes to that, because people say, well, what does that mean? Am I supposed to do 10 sets? Am I supposed to do 20 sets? And I think what creates that confusion is because people don't understand that it is very, very dependent. That we have that range, and it's a very broad range, because that's usually where optimal muscle growth tends to occur, somewhere in there, assuming your stimulus is adequate and your recovery can handle it. But the problem becomes, people say, well, how do we judge those sets? Well, should we count this as a half set, a full set, if we do this exercise, or we hold back? And the thing is, the way that I would look at it is two factors. Number one, you're balancing your stimulus with your recovery. And that's why this range does seem to work, because if you do too much, you don't recover adequately, and you actually gain less from the gym. And a lot of people don't seem to be aware of that, but there's been quite a few studies that have found that over the years. As a coach, I have found this with many lifters over the years. I've had lifters who were stalled, they were gaining literally nothing, and they were not even true intermediates yet. I cut their work in half, literally cut the amount of training they were doing in half, sometimes more. Then they start hitting lifetime PRs on their rep work. I don't just mean, they're coming in and hitting maxes on their big stuff. And maxes, they're hitting their 5 and 10 rep sets. They're hitting PRs. All of a sudden, a weight that they can only do for 4 reps, they're able to put 10 more pounds on the bar and do 3 sets of 5 with it. Okay? Within a relatively short period of time, a matter of weeks. Taking lifters who were stuck, at a 405 squat, cut their work in half. 3 months later, they hit a 450 squat. Eventually, they get to a 500 after spending 2.5 years at 405. So there's that factor, and then there's the not getting enough. So what you're balancing there is on the stimulus side, you have to look at the quality of the work. Okay, so when you're counting those sets, you kind of have to go, well, if you're doing all lower quality stimulus, you're definitely going to need to be further up there. In other words, let's say for biceps, all you're doing is rows. Well, rows are not a particularly amazing bicep stimulator. They're not terrible. They're not quite as good as curls or chin-ups. And we have research showing that. They produce good growth, just not quite as much as those. A little lower quality stimulus. Maybe you're further away from muscle failure. You're not going as hard on the sets. Okay, well, your sets are going to need to be a little higher. Okay? Conversely, if you're doing really high quality work, well, we know that less sets are required to cause great muscle growth. Again, been found in studies. It's been found in the real world for decades observing lifters. Higher quality sets, better exercises. Training a little harder goes a long way. It goes a real long way. All right? You can be towards the lower end of that scale. That's on the stimulus side. All right, what about the recovery end? Well, genetic predisposition to recovery, that's a factor. Absolute strength. Your diet, quality of diet, total calories, that's all factors. If you're in a calorie surplus, you can train harder and recover from it. Okay, this shouldn't be a difficult concept. Better hormone profile, more IGF-1, more fuel, more training, building blocks for tissue. Well, it makes sense. Of course, you can handle a little more. You recover easier. If you're in a calorie deficit, you're depleting resources. It's harder to recover. It's harder to train. Yeah, not difficult to understand. How about when people use drugs? Ooh, there's a big one. I think that affects recovery. You don't think anabolic drugs that repair tissue and make people grow muscle who have wasting diseases or who are bedridden? Right? Because they do. They build muscle in those people. It repairs tissue. You don't think that speeds up recovery? Of course it does. Is this even debatable? Okay? How about stress management? How about sleep? How about your overall fatigue? How about how in shape you are, what your work capacity is? Okay, that is an enormous, all of that together is an enormous combination of variables. Okay, if those are really off, you can't even handle the minimum amount to grow. You won't even recover from it. Okay, if those factors all get too messed up, you might not be able to recover from 8 hard sets a week. You can't even recover from it. Well, you're sure not going to grow. If your sleep, stress management, food intake won't even let you recover from 8 sets, you're not gaining muscle. You're going to lose muscle at that point. There is no longer an optimal volume at that point. There just isn't. Nothing's going to make you grow. Okay? What if all those factors are perfect? Food is on point. You're sleeping 9 hours. You're relaxing. You're de-stressing. Okay, that might push someone up closer to those 20 sets. You're in good shape, good condition from cardio. Then a person throws a bunch of drugs at it. Well, then they can handle 30. But that's not what we're talking about, is it? We're not talking about the people who can do it that way. We're talking about people on no drugs. Okay? These are all variables that matter, and we're balancing that all the time. So when we give that range, it's not just intended as a loose guideline. It's saying, hey, in this range somewhere is probably 95% chance your sweet spot is somewhere in that range. And if you stick to that range for the most part, you're probably going to be okay. Is it going to be perfect? Maybe not. Maybe it's not optimal. But it's going to be decent. The end of it is, all right, maybe you're doing a little too little, or you're not optimal. You got the recovery to handle the 20 cents, and you do 10. You're definitely not going to grow as fast. But you're going to grow, especially if they're high quality sets, 10 good sets. Oh yeah, definitely going to grow some. All right, you get on the other end, you can't quite recover. Some of those things aren't on point. You're pushing too high. You can't recover. Well, you may not grow, or you're going to grow suboptimally. Okay, so we're balancing these two things all the time. But when people say, well, you've got to look at all those factors. They're all relevant. And that's part of the art of coaching. As a coach, it's my job oftentimes to look at those things and figure out where a lifter's sweet spot kind of is at any given time. And remember, it can be different for different muscles in the same person. Right? And it usually is. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.